look for ways to lift them up, both in their work and in their life, because not only will this effort increase your understanding of the world, but it becomes reciprocal when you have built a community around yourself where people look out for each other.
Welcome to Work Inspired, a podcast where leaders in business, commercial real estate, technology, and design come together to discuss change, challenge, and opportunity in today's professional world. This show is powered by BOS, a leader in commercial interiors. The team of workplace experts at BOS is equipped and ready to help you navigate the path to your next workspace. Whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting out in your career, you're going to learn something new today. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and get ready to work inspired. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, is a top talking point for many business leaders and organizations today. On today's episode of Work Inspired, we have a very special guest. Jenn Ramirez Robson is the Vice President of Employment Services for Northwest Center. And she's going to talk to us about how including people with disabilities on our teams is not only a good thing to do from a human perspective, but it also makes great business sense. Work Inspired starts right now. Jenn, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. So excited to speak with you and to learn from you. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you, George. Glad to be here.
So every guest that's on the show starts by kind of giving us the Cliff Notes version of their professional story. If you would be so kind, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to what you're doing today.
Sure, I'd love to. First, I will start with a little bit of a physical description of myself. I am a middle-aged Latina. I have silvery white curls today with electric blue round glasses and a green shirt. So I always like to get the physical description in there for folks who may not be able to actually see the video. So thank you for indulging me in that. My professional career, it sounds a bit eclectic. I would say a through line through my career has been service. I started my career in the United States Air Force as a mechanic on C-130 gunships. Kind of unique.
Yes, thanks for your service.
Thank you. And it does catch people's attentions. I then went into hotel management for a number of years. And so I would say service came in there as well. I then transitioned into working for local government for many years. And I really really honed in not only in service, but in service to the people who've been the most excluded in our communities from opportunity and from resources. And, and as that has progressed, I find that many times people are excluded for reasons we don't even know or understand. And that has has led me to Northwest Center. I'm the Vice President now of Employment Services, where we work with and support people of varying abilities in their career journey.
So tell me a little bit more about Northwest Center. What do you do, and what kind of makes you unique? Sure.
Well, I think a few things. Northwest Center, we often talk about, we were founded by 4 Seattle mothers in 1965 who were told that their children with developmental and intellectual disabilities had no place in the community, that they should be shuttered away in institutions and not seen, right? And these mothers, rightly so, said, no, we're not doing that. Our children deserve, and we love them, they deserve to be here in the community and that they can learn and work alongside us. They started their own school, which was the beginning of Northwest Center. And because they then were able to realize and demonstrate that their children could learn, they ended up teaming up with some law interns from University of Washington, and they wrote House Bill 90, which is called the Washington Education for All Act, which passed in 1971. And it became the blueprint for the national legislation, which is now known as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that says that all of our children have a right to an education, a public education. And, this was our founding, right? That, this passion that no matter what disability you have a right and to be in the community, both in schools and in the workplaces. And that's where we are, is within employment services, where we, as people transition into adulthood, we support people of variety of disabilities, as I said, on their career journey. And that could be for a little while, or it could be for, their span of their career.
Sure. So you've started off in kind of with children and in the education setting, and then you've expanded your services into the employment and the corporate world.
Yes.
When you talk about disabilities, is it physical disabilities? Is it mental disabilities? Is it a variety of different types? What type of people do you serve?
Absolutely. So in supported employment, which is one section that we do, we work with people with some of the most severe barriers to employment. So that could span intellectual and developmental disabilities, also be physical disabilities. We do work also, we work with people who are blind or low vision, deaf, hard of hearing, cerebral palsy, physical, mental. We also have other programs where we work with people who may have physical or mental disabilities in behavioral health. And what we find across the span. So I would say there's not a disability that we don't work with, right? And what we find across the span is that everybody wants to be included, and they have so many gifts and strengths and abilities. Even someone who maybe they aren't able to verbalize, their thoughts, or they don't speak, but they communicate in other ways. And we find we're constantly finding with joy, what the abilities that they bring into the community, and everybody wants to be appreciated. Right. So when we talk about this, this isn't charity where, we ask people to please, hire people with disabilities. There's data now and many studies that say that employing people with disabilities in the workplace, you have higher productivity, you have a higher safety record, you have higher retention rates for staff. I mean, there's so many different things that, where people think, oh, well, if we're hiring people with disabilities, we're going to have to lower our standards or lower our expectations. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Yes. I want to talk about that, especially because DE&I, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, is such a hot topic right now. And I think it's always been important, right? But it's got so much attention and focus right now on so many different levels that I think a service like yours is really important. Now, before we go there, though, tell me a little bit more about what you actually do. Do you work with people with disabilities and help them find jobs, or do you work with employers and help them create jobs for people with disabilities, or is it a combination? How do you solve some of the problems that previously existed before Northwest Center?
Great question, George. So, and you're right. So let me talk about a few of those things, because it's any and all of those things. We provide transition services. So this could be high school students. This could be transitioning into the community from a community setting or institutional setting. But we work with people to start preparing for that. And that includes also vocational training, of course, and part of that is we also utilize person-centered planning with our clients, where we find out about their strengths and abilities and what they want to do, so that we're not just, finding any job that will take them. We're finding those jobs that people are really, looking for, or maybe building a ladder to that job. And I think of one client who we have. He wants to be the first sportscaster with autism, and so we work with that. We work with the steps on how to get there, and then like I said, and to your point about finding employers, then once we find out what that person is working toward, then we start talking to different employers, different people in the community, and saying, you know what, we have a client who's interested in doing this, and we might work with them to say, to get past the no, we don't have a job for somebody with disabilities, like, or who may have severe challenges or barriers to employment. So we work with them to review job descriptions and see where we might be able to carve out a body of work that is maybe not the essential duties for someone, and that could free up their time to do more things. So it could be that. And then we, in some cases, our work with a client sort of ends once they are into the workplace and they're feeling confident. But other times they might have needs where one of our job coaches may be with them for a longer period of time, or they might be side by side with them throughout their career. So it really depends, on the support needs for the individual. In other programs where we work with people who, just incredible, their skills and abilities. But, I talk about, somebody who's blind, they could do amazing things, in their job, but trying to use a screen reader to set up a meeting with multiple people. Imagine listening to a screen reader read everybody's schedule and try and keep that all in your head is not going to happen. Actually, it does happen, but they spend a lot of time. So we provide supports in some cases where we have people come in who are removing those barriers and those challenges, so that what I like to say is that their full and true brilliance can shine.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's just a little bit of what we do.
No, it sounds like it's great work and rewarding work too. Yeah. Let's dig a little bit into some of those metrics that you said, the supporting evidence as to why this isn't just a good thing to do, but it's also makes business sense. And we've actually had a whole episode on this podcast about neurodiversity, and I think that difference in ways of thinking and perceiving and experiencing, I think if you can bring that onto a team, especially in a collaboration or a creativity or an innovation type of a environment, I think it's easy to connect those dots. If you can think differently, you might come up with some unique solutions, or if you might get new perspectives or other ideas. But talk about how some of these other, including people with disabilities on your team, can help to improve retention rate or something like that. Like, why do you think you're finding that there are so many benefits to inclusivity in the workforce?
Absolutely. Well, one of the unique things about Northwest Center is not only do we provide what we call these mission services for kids and adults, we also have several lines of business that generate revenue that help support those mission services. And one of those we have a large branch of, they're called pivotal systems, but think of those as like integrated facility services, whether that be janitorial, landscaping, so forth. And we have our own inclusion goals of having at least 30% of people who we employ having self-declared disability. And so we walk the talk, right? And within facility services, I think it's closer to 40%. But they have very low turnover rate. I think I heard the other day, industry-wide, it's about 18% turnover rate. Wow. And theirs is about 4%.
Wow, 4%. That is a huge difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you think the reason is because, we hear time and time again on this show that being genuine, caring about people, that really matters. It's like one of the most fundamental pieces of business success and one of the most recommended things that business leaders have said over and over again. Do you think organizations that actually do have an inclusivity program and actually walk the walk, do you think that those organizations tend to be more people focused and that's why they have a lower turnover rate?
I think so. I think that's absolutely true. And not only that, when you are identifying people's strengths and abilities, right, which are it's going to be across the board, it's going to be a spectrum. And instead of expecting everybody to be the same, right, sort of the faceless cog in the wheel, you turn that on its head and say, actually, we're going to see every person on the team as an individual. And we're going to get to know you and know your strengths. And, and when you're, but we're going to support one another. I think that's the other piece too. That it's not a one-way street, that's not what happens when you hire somebody with disabilities, because you know what, we all have times when we need support. And,
Mhm.
When we're demonstrating that, when we're showing that, yeah, we believe that everybody here has the skills and abilities to do this job, but we're also going to be here to support one another because we have shared goals and we have shared success.
Mhm.
One of the things I often say as a leader is I'm only as successful as my least successful employee,
Mhm.
and I believe that.
Yeah.
And so I also say, you know what, they all know what they do, and they all do a fantastic job, and they could do it probably without me,
Mm.
but I can't do my job without them. If I don't have a team, I don't have anyone to lead, right? So
Mhm.
I very much see this as a model of shared success, and we get
Mhm.
there together.
Yeah, and well said. I mentioned it earlier, but we
Mhm.
work with a lot of different clients in the commercial interiors space, and
Mhm.
DEI is hugely important today, more so than ever before. Are you seeing the same thing? Are you seeing an increased focus on the services that you offer and on inclusivity and diversity in thinking? That's not just something isolated to I mean, we do work all over the country, but are you seeing a pickup?
Right.
And if so, why do you think it's more important today, or more? It's a higher focused um, part of the conversation than it has been in the past.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, well, we've all experienced an incredible level of trauma over the last
Hmm.
2.5 years, right?
Hmm.
We've had a pandemic, and we've also seen, horrendous things in our society that have, put DE&I at the top, of a lot of people's radar. But I think, it's a little discouraging, but that's why I talk about this, is that even with the growth in DEI efforts and programs, um, studies show that less than 1 in 3 actually include disability in DEI.
Hmm.
And I think part of that, we've still been socialized that people with disabilities don't have abilities that are needed or wanted in the workplace.
Hmm.
So I think that's one reason. But some of what I try and tell people is that, 1 in 4 people in America have some form of disability. I myself have both non-apparent and apparent disabilities, and, function in the workplace. And not only that, this is like 61 million people in,
Hmm.
in our country who have a disability, and they represent the nation's largest legally protected minority class
Hmm.
in the country, right?
Wow.
But,
Yeah.
but people with disabilities, they also often find the greatest challenges when it comes to finding work, right? And so we don't see as many people with disabilities in the workplace. So maybe we think that they don't need to be included in
Hmm.
DEI, but I argue, very much so, because we have a lot of work to do. You know, I think the other piece too is that we often see people with disabilities as people who are broken or
Hmm.
need to be fixed or modified in some way in order to be brought into the workplace. But in fact, it's our society that puts those barriers in place. And it's up to us to discover those barriers and get them out of the way, because that's what it's going to take. That's the mindset. I tell people they need to be detectives, have a detective mindset going, okay, I'm going to look at this, whatever it is, and think about where could there be a barrier
Hmm.
for someone who has a disability, and then just be as eager and excited to get that barrier out of the way. But the thing is, we're not saying that disability is the only thing in DEI, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Because all of those barriers I talk about, they are compounded for disabled workers of color, or gender. If you layer on gender, LGBTQIA, any of those things, it compounds those challenges and those barriers. And so we actually think that employers have to be equipped to accommodate the whole employee, recognizing a disabled individual's intersectional identity, including race or gender. And that what we believe is that we have to be both anti-ableist and anti-racist in this work
Mm.
to be successful. We have to do it all together. You can't just pick one piece and say, we're going to work on this today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I that's very interesting, and yeah, including the disability part in the DEI conversation. I think you're right; it doesn't get talked about that often. But as you said, largest protected class in the United States. Why it needs to be right? So
Right.
I do think when you say the pandemic in the last 2 years have exposed some of the mental health issues in our country and around the world. Um, you're right. And maybe that's why there's a kind of a renewed focus on it right now, because it has to be a focus because so many people are impacted by it. But I also know that one of the things that's come about
Mm-hmm.
since COVID is an increase in technology, an increase in
Mm-hmm.
innovation, some changes to ways of working that were traditionally not acceptable. Have you seen new technology or new opportunity in the last 2 years that have helped you do your job better and find work for people that maybe you wouldn't have been able to before the pandemic?
Absolutely. I'll give one example that we found that changed the way that we do our work.
Mm,
We've been doing this for decades, right? And I think and we do work with many clients who are nonverbal, and so we do coaching with them, or training with them one-on-one in person. That's how we do it, right? And then all of a sudden we couldn't when we
mm,
were shut down. And
mm,
so we started issuing laptops or tablets to clients, right? I know of a couple of examples where even their family or caregivers, they would say, oh, they can't use a computer, right? And we were able, in some cases, they were able to learn ASL and communicate that way, or even start verbalizing, right? And there was one of our clients learned how to use a computer, took over his mother's computer, you know, and just it opened up a whole new world. And then and now that person is back in their physical job, they actually utilize some of those skills they learned online or virtually in their physical job. And we're constantly challenging ourselves to have a growth mindset with our clients and ourselves to say, how can we learn and how can we grow? I think it was a very interesting experience for many people with disabilities that companies that said, oh no, we don't do remote work, we don't do telework, somehow managed to do it in about the span of a week. Right? Do we all remember that crazy time when we were scrambling, deploying laptops and all of these things and getting people set up? So I think that excuse is out the window now, right? We've seen it happen. We know that just about any company can do it. But I do caution people. I know it has been really hard for leaders over the last 2.5 years to deal with the constantly changing conditions. I understand the desire to get back to that predictable kind of place where you weren't having to change or look at policies or practices every week. That was hard. It is hard. But we can't go back. And I don't think the workforce will allow us to go back to having blanket policies and practices. What I see works best is when you talk with your teams and your individuals and say, okay, what do we think is going to work today, this week,
mm,
this month? Let's try it this month, right? And see
mhm,
how that goes. Because things are still happening. We still have, upticks in COVID cases. We have people who are experiencing, I say as an entire planet, we are experiencing PTSD from the pandemic, right?
mhm,
We are reading about the issues of mental health, particularly for our youth, but I think all of us are experiencing that in some way or another. And so we have to be gentle with each other and flexible, because what was comfortable for somebody this week may not be comfortable for next week. And when it comes to and that includes people with disabilities, right? Like you can't assume, oh, well, they have disabilities, they've been able to do this from home. Well, let's just assume that they always want to work from home, right? Well, actually, what I'm hearing and I'm seeing it from my own team, where, I know it's easier for people to be working from home, but they miss the interaction, and they also know that social connection is important, and they still want to be in the office, like, one day a week. So you can't just assume anymore what you hear from someone today is what they want tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you said that, especially since we create offices and workspaces.
Yeah.
But we're seeing the same thing. That people, one of the biggest downsides of the pandemic, and there was plenty of them, but was the isolated nature of it. And there are
Yeah.
some conveniences, of course, with the flexibility of hybrid or remote work, but we are
Mhm.
seeing a bit of a eagerness to come back together, to be in person, to develop relationships, to learn, be mentored, to all the things that we kind of missed out on over the last couple of years. And so I know that many business owners are rethinking not only how and when they work, but also the place in which they do their work. And when it comes to the workplace or the commercial office, a lot of them are refreshing or redesigning their floor plate. And so I wonder if you have any advice in terms of some secrets to making a workplace more accessible for someone with disabilities. And I know this is probably a tough question because you work with such a wide variety of people. But where should people start when they're thinking about their floor plate or their workspace and how they can make it a little bit more inclusive for a larger amount of people, whether they work currently for them or maybe will in the future as a new hire down the road?
Yeah. Well, I think, a couple of terms that we hear a lot are universal design or inclusive design, which is this idea that if you design your workplace in a way that works for most people, we hope everybody, but for most people, that it actually makes it a better workspace. I think when we try and get a little too creative and unique, we end up creating spaces that don't work for folks. But I also think the biggest piece of advice I can give is to have people with a variety of disabilities come and review your workplace. Right? Take a camera around, and or even your phone, and take a video of your workspace, walking through your workspace, or better yet, have them visit. Buy them lunch, have them come there, or you might actually ask your own team, because either they might have disabilities you're not aware of, or they could provide some advice. And I say that because I think it's critical to have people who actually have that lived experience of having a disability, who are looking through it, because otherwise it's just too easy to overlook things. And I'll give an example of, those buttons for automatic door openers on bathrooms, right? Hey, great during the pandemic. I didn't have to touch anything. I would just elbow a button and they would open the doors, right? But those are critical for people who use wheelchairs. And I heard somebody recently say, yeah, I can usually get in, but I can't get out. And so imagine being trapped in a bathroom, or having to call somebody to let you out of the bathroom. Where's the human dignity in that, right? And so, so these things aren't just, they could be nice for some people, but they're actually really critical for other people to even be able to use your space. And you want to try and mitigate that as much as possible.
Yeah, it's great advice, and it's a perspective that I don't think a lot of us think through because it it doesn't directly impact us. But you're right. Maybe we can use some of these innovations or new technologies that we have implemented into our spaces for safety reasons, and maybe they can stick around for more inclusivity reasons, to make our spaces more universally approachable or accessible.
I think some of, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think some of the fun and exciting things that are coming out of workspace creativity, right, is multimodal things that can serve different purposes, can easily fold or bend or do things in different ways. And again, I think bringing people in with disabilities to say, what could this look like? Or, would I see things that flip around or fold or move, and ensuring that could work for them too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it light enough? Is it flexible enough? Can somebody using a wheelchair reach that thing that you flip, sideways? And but I think being able to create spaces on the fly, I think that those are really exciting, because I do think that flexibility, again, in just about everything that you do, can make your workplace more accessible.
It sounds like, well, we've talked a little bit about it, how having people with different ways of thinking or different abilities
Mm-hmm.
as part of your team can encourage and increase your level of innovation at an organization. And then
Mm-hmm.
you also said that part of your job is to be a bit of a detective and to look for creative solutions for challenges. So I'm wondering. I mean, it seems like innovation is a big part of one of the results of what you do, and of including people that you work with on teams within organizations. So thinking about it, inspiring innovation. I know that's another topic of conversation frequently on this show. Um, I wonder what you're thinking about innovation. Is it something at an organization that should be a goal for all team members? Should we be inclusive in our innovation goals, or do you see it more as a specialized skill set reserved for a select few at an organization?
Well, definitely not the last one. Uh,
Figured.
um, no, I think innovation, can and does, comes from every member of your organization. And I think, how business leaders, how I try to inspire innovation is to look for it, show people that they're not going to be ridiculed for
Mhm.
bringing up an idea that nobody else, thinks might be viable, right? Um, Say, tell me more about that. And then once you learn about that, create a team. Maybe you create a little team and say, hey, let's explore this more. Maybe this is something we can implement. And when employees see that happen, that anybody can be recognized for their idea as being worthwhile, of at least even looking into it, that I think that just sparks more and more creativity. And I've seen that happen. I've seen
Mhm.
that happen. And sure, there have been times where I've heard of things, they're like, I don't know about that. But, I am surprised also again and again, when we see what that looks like, when people look at what it would take to do that. And it usually is making the work better, making the work more efficient, um, setting setting a standard that we didn't have before, and um, and it also might make the work easier too. So those are all good things.
Yeah, we all want that, right?
Yeah.
Well, I kind of ask every guest 3 questions at the end of each
Hmm.
episode, and it's a little
Ah,
bit more personal, but it can be
hmm.
professional or personal. It's up to you. But looking forward, we're well into 2022 now. But looking at the next 12 months, the year ahead, what's something you're excited about or
Mm,
looking forward to?
absolutely. One of the things, and we have, in addition to working with individuals with disabilities, as I said, we've worked with employers for decades as well, right? But what we're trying to do now, and we've launched this year, an expanded, coaching, consulting, and training unit, called the Inclusion and Belonging Collective. And the idea is to really intentionally work with employers to find out, where are their pain points, where are their fears, where is disability inclusion not working for them. And then, once we achieve that deeper understanding, and relationship, then we can come in, and suggest some, going beyond the 1 or 2 webinar approach, right? Where do your managers need coaching and supports, if they do,
Mhm.
right? Because we often find that's where, disability inclusion and, frankly, DEI efforts in general, tend to struggle, is when it comes to, rolling it out, and middle management gets, stuck in how to really do that, because it's different than what they've done before. So we're looking forward to that. Really, getting to know employers and, understanding where they're at in their journey and how we can partner with them. And then personally, I'm also looking forward to taking flying lessons this year.
Ooh.
That's my personal goal that I'm looking forward to.
That's exciting. I've done that one time and it was enough for me, but it's an incredible experience flying an airplane. So I would be looking forward to that too. I've
gone flying, skydiving twice. So it'll be interesting to stay in the aircraft this time.
Yes, it's very different. I've done the skydiving thing as well. Flying the airplane, what was crazy about it was how much they let you do. I had like an hour of training, and all of a sudden I'm taking off. I'm flying around Chicago, and he took the yoke, I think it's called, back right 20 yards from the landing. So those planes can flop around in the sky quite a bit and not fall out of the sky. So fun with that. It's an incredible experience. But I was actually going to ask you about a resource, and you kind of just shared that answer.
Sure.
Almost always I ask, leaders, what's a resource that's been helpful to them professionally throughout their career. But I think for you, I just feel like right now the education side on DEI and and especially the disability piece and why it can benefit a business, why it's important. I think people know that it's important to take care of people, but when you get into business, there's always kind of got to be a business sense, right? So, is there a resource that you can share that maybe if somebody's considering making some changes or just wanting to learn a little bit more about it or where they can go to take the next steps, what would you recommend?
Absolutely. Well, of course, I'm going to say, you can come and talk to me. You can come and talk to us. I think when you think about some of the unique things about our organization, not only do we have kind of mission service, social services, but we run businesses too, right? So we have on the ground understanding of what it's like to run a business, as well as supporting people who live with disabilities. So we know a thing or two about that, right? Sure. And we're willing to share. And if you're not ready for kind of a full-on engagement, we can talk through where you're at and maybe some areas that we could help or assist now. And we can do that anywhere in the country. So location is not particularly a barrier for us. But we have partners across the country as well that we have relationships with too. So we can help you find that place to start or maybe restart.
I love it. I was actually going to ask about that. So anyone around the country can reach out to you and have that be a starting point. That's great. Thank you. Final question. Let's say you get in that airplane and decide you're going to be a pilot and retire this year. What's some words of advice that you would leave behind for a predecessor or for someone who you are mentoring?
Sure. Well, I actually, some advice that I give a lot is that, relationships matter. And so connecting with people, listening and learning from them, because I think every single person on the planet has a piece of wisdom for me. Right. And for you, and then look for ways to lift them up, both in their work and in their life, because not only will this effort increase your understanding of the world, but it becomes reciprocal when you have built a community around yourself where people look out for each other. Yeah,
that's great advice. Jenn, this has been very inspiring. I want to say thank you for the important work that you're doing. Thanks for sharing your inspiration and your insight on the show today.
Great. Thank you so much, George. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to rate our show. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Work Inspired podcast so that you don't miss any of the incredible guests we have planned for upcoming episodes. We'll continue to find the best and brightest minds in business so that you can learn, grow, and succeed, and so that we can all work inspired. Work Inspired is brought to you by BOS, a leader in commercial working environments and a Hayworth best-in-class dealership. Experience our 360 approach and discover the team, tools, and techniques required to navigate the complexity of your next workspace at BOS.com. If you have ideas, feedback, or would like to be featured on our show, please email podcast@BOS.com. Thank you for listening. This has been a Workspace digital production. If you're interested in launching a podcast at your organization, please email info@workspace.digital for a free consultation.